Hi there, welcome to yet another session of Learning English is Fun with Teacher Fidelis. And today we shall be looking at creative writing. Have you been writing a composition? When was the last time you wrote a composition? Answer that question in the comment section, and I'll take you through some of the things that you can do to improve your composition writing. I'm very sure you want to get to a situation where you can get 18 out of 20 and even 20 out of 20. It is possible. So the first thing we look at, even before we look at some of the things that you should consider when writing, is that composition writing is tested in English paper 3, question 1, A and B. And for both question A and B, what is tested is language use. Language use. How do you use the language to communicate? That is what the examiner is interested in. Shall we start? Now, as you write your composition, make sure that it's legible. How do you write? How is your handwriting? That is something that is very simple, but very, very important. Make sure that you can write something that is seen, is readable. You can come up with a very interesting story, but if someone can't read it, then it will be in vain. See how to write letters well. How do you write capital F? How do you write capital M? Can you distinguish between a capital M and a big small m? Because if you don't write well, these are some of the things that will cost you some marks, and you'll have your composition full of gross errors. So check on your handwriting, make sure that you can write well. If it's an I, what is the difference between a capital I and a small I? A small I is dotted, meaning if you have an I in the middle of a letter, in the middle of a word that is not dotted, that is a capital letter. It just brings about more errors, and it makes sure that you keep missing your marks. Number 2, avoid gross errors. The first one that I've talked about is a form of gross error, but we have more like spelling mistakes. You know, when you keep misspelling the simple words, you get double lines. Those double lines means that you belong to a certain category in the composition, that is either category C or category D. At this point, what do we want to get? We want to get to category A and category B. Another mistake or gross error that you can have is when you don't observe punctuation marks. When you write what constitutes a sentence starts with a capital letter and ends with a full stop. So if your sentence is not starting with a capital letter, it means that there's an error. If you're missing a full stop, there's another error. Observe those punctuation marks. When you're having a dialogue in your composition, ensure that you're using opening and closing speech marks, and observe the punctuation rules that we use in such an area. Number 2, or number 3 in this case, consider an outline. Consider having an outline in your writing. You know, sometimes you just get a question, and even before you think about what you write about, you just take your pen and you start writing. That is a mistake. That is not what you should do when you write a composition. Before you start getting down to writing your composition, think about the plot. Think about the characters that you will have in your composition. Think about the setting. So to start with, the plot gives you a summary of what you write about. Think about the story. Think about the conflict. Make sure that your story has a conflict because it makes it interesting. We want to know what happened. Why did these people get themselves in a certain situation? Did they resolve the issue? Did you learn something out of it? This is the plot. Ensure that you know how the story is flowing. The next thing that you should do is have the characters. The maximum number of words that you should have in a composition is 450. Therefore, don't come up with so many characters. Have one protagonist in the story and then have other supporting characters. So you can have a story of a student who ran away from school and then what happened after. You can have a story of a poor person uh, who excelled. You can have a story of a person who developed an app that worked. You know, there's so many things that you can talk about, but have that plot. When you think about having a villain in your story, this villain should not be the hero, okay? You can use this villain to actually show the person reading your work that, yeah, people make mistakes. These are some of the things that people do, but how do you come out of it? What do you do? Do you learn something out of it? So your villain should not be the hero, but you can use your villain to actually teach a lesson. Then the setting. Is the setting in a city? Is it in the village? Is it in the forest? Where is the setting? And bear in mind that you don't need to have just one setting. You can move, you can grind from one setting to the next. From the village, go to the forest, move to the city, from the city, move to another place. You can keep changing, but give a description. This is where you bring in vivid description. If it's the forest, talk about the forest. And then think about your story. Is it an airy kind of story? You know, something that is scary. So if you're writing about it and you're in a forest, think about the caves. Think about all the poisonous animals, the snakes that would be in that place. Or think about the forest as a place that is peaceful. So think about the wind, the trees swaying, the river flowing. It could take any aspect really. And then if you get now to the town, the city, think about how the buildings are, how the roads are, the people. What is the difference? Compare and contrast and bring that to life. The next thing is being original. As you write your composition, do not copy someone else's composition. Don't go read a story in a certain book and then copy it in the exam. No. Be creative, be original. That's why we call it creative writing. Think about something that you know, then become the narrator. In this case, you can actually use the first person narration. I went to the city in the morning thinking that I could get into the bank and then head to work. But the worst happened. You cannot develop your story from there. You're supposed to go to work, go via the bank, get some money, but then something happened. So what happened? Were you attacked by someone? Did you find someone who was going through something and you went to help them? Was there something happening in the streets and you decided to stand there and watch, and then something else happened? You can develop. You can develop your own story. You don't have to go and copy someone else's story. So have twists and turns as you write your story. Don't have something that is so straightforward in such a way that someone can keep guessing the next thing that will happen. Now, the next thing is avoiding using overused cliches. Don't use cliches. Don't have overused phrases. They're not good. Don't say, I was walking as my feeble feet could carry me, or I within the shake of a lamb's tail. No, those are archaic sayings. Don't use them. Have a very simplistic composition, and then use proper sentences. Use a variety of sentences that will elevate your composition to the next level. Don't say I was burning the midnight oil. Just talk about someone who is diligent. In any case, you can make the use of adjectives because they describe a situation even better. And when you use adjectives, you don't even have to use just one adjective. Remember the order of adjectives from to work. You can use the order of adjectives to describe many ideas, many character traits, many places. You can make use of that. Now, when I talk about using a variety of sentences, this means that you can use simple sentences, complex sentences, and compound sentences. When you want to show contrasting ideas, you use coordinating conjunctions such as but, yet, among others. Subordinating conjunctions can also be used as you write. But then look at the usage and what we mentioned above, observing punctuation rules. So that when you use a variety of sentences, and in this case you use subordinating conjunctions, then it means that if you start with a subordinating conjunction, that first part of the sentence should be followed by a comma. If you don't have a comma, then you will have a gross error that will give you lower marks. Have conjunctions, especially the correlatives, use them the way they're supposed to be used. Not only, but also. Hardly, when. Don't interchange or use the wrong order, because again, you'll be bringing about some issues. The next thing, incorporate writing styles. Have twists and turns in your writing. Have flashback. You know, when you write a composition, sometimes the usual way or what many people use is the start of the story, have a rising action, you get to a conflict, and then have a resolution, and then you end your composition. You don't have to do that. You can use a flashback in the first sentence, in the first paragraph of your writing. Um, Talk about someone who woke up in a different house with different people in a different country, and then take us back and tell us what happened. This is a person, when going to bed, they went to sleep on their bed, but then when they woke up in the morning, they found themselves in a different, you can even create contrast by talking about people of a different race. You see those indigenous people who live in the forest or something. Talk about that and use flashback. When you use flashback, you explain what had happened earlier, and at the same time you create suspense. So that is another style that you can use. When there's suspense, you want to know what happened. You'll be glued to the writing so that you know what had happened to this particular character. Use vivid description of situations, places, people. You have a villain in your writing. Now, how can you use vivid description to show that this person is not a person you play with? Think about the facial description. Maybe this man has a scar, an ugly scar, not just any scar, an ugly scar that is running across his face. How is the hair? The hair is ragged, okay? And then maybe colored to a red color, something outrageous, okay? Then you can think about his physique in terms of height. He's a tall person, dark and with tattered clothes, or maybe he wore this hoodie that covered his face, or he has even a mask. But then when you look at his eyes, they're fiery and they're red. And when you see him, you actually get scared. So think about how you can use vivid description to describe a person, a situation, a place. Irony. How do you use irony? Sometimes we find irony when we read some of the set text that we have, but in actual sense, you can use irony to make your story even more interesting. Think about the situational irony, the verbal irony. Situation works in this case when you're writing because you can inform the person reading your work about something that the main character does not know. Like now, you can have a situation where someone is going for a date, and as the person reading, you actually highlight that the person has some similar characteristics to someone close to this girl or to this boy in any case. You can give some information to the person reading your work, the character does not know, the main character does not know. So as I read your work, then I'll be looking forward to just finding out, did the main character get to know the secret? How did he react? That creates suspense as well, as in as much as it's irony. Then as you continue writing, you can also use dialogue. When you have dialogue in your writing, ensure that this dialogue brings something extra to the writing. It's not just dialogue, having two people exchanging or having a conversation. No, have something, an addition to your writing. You can talk about the character traits. How does someone answer a question? Ironically, sarcastically, angrily. You get to learn about the character who is speaking. You can develop the plot using the dialogue, inform the people reading your work what will happen next through that conversation, okay? So once you have a dialogue, don't have a dialogue for the sake of having it, but have a dialogue that is actually interesting and bringing something to the table. Your short story, your composition should be relevant. Sometimes you're given a, a, a what? A proverb. Sometimes you're given a sentence to start your composition, but then the composition that is written does not even add up to the proverb that you have. All that glitters is not gold. Don't write a story, then force that proverb into your story. And especially when you have a sentence that ends your composition, don't have a story and then force, like a forced end. No, think about the ending, then think about something that would actually make sense in this situation. When you have a proverb, don't define the proverb, don't give the meaning of the proverb. Think about a story that you can write that resonates with the proverb that you have been given. Then on descriptive compositions, talk about drug abuse in Kenya. Even if you give 10 reasons or 10 reasons why people actually use drugs in Kenya, and the language used does not show that you know how to use language, you will not score well. Look for words that you can use to explain that particular situation. And lastly, when you write a composition, have a moral lesson. Remember what we said earlier? Do not make the villain your hero. Mm-mm. You should learn a lesson. You should learn a lesson as you write. Communicate something. All that glitters is not gold. What is the lesson there? Don't see something that looks so good and think that this is a good thing. Take your time. Take your time to go through it and see whether it's something that is helpful. Okay. Now, when you have that, then it makes your story complete. Before we end the lesson, I'll just read an example of a beginning of a composition, and then maybe you can continue writing it. It's just an example of something that you can come up with. And so I read, the first quiver of morning sunshine streamed through the cracks of the dilapidated hut. Jasmine still lay in bed in a delightful state of morning drowsiness. She wished it was a holiday. Begrudgingly, she dragged herself from the rugged mat. She had spent the entire night studying for her exams. Her eyes were not taking the torture lightly. They itched and ached. She thought, and then you can continue writing. Using that example, you can see that we have used a few words that can give you meritics, a dilapidated heart. And for a moment, let me talk about that word. Sometimes you find learners using words. Yeah, they're good words, the words that can give you marks, but used wrongly. Look at the context. You cannot talk about a dilapidated dress. For a dress, you talk about a tattered dress. But if it's a hat, it's dilapidated. It's old, it has cracks and everything. If you talk about this hat in the village, and maybe you have cobwebs and whatnot, you can use the same situation to talk about something airy. So it depends on how you actually describe the situation, the place, to bring out the kind of environment, the kind of feeling that you want. But otherwise, there's so much that you can talk about, there's so much that you can write about, and hopefully you can try and write a composition. Don't wait until it's the exam time. Keep trying. Writing is an art, and for you to be a good writer, you have to keep trying. Now, every Monday, Daily Nation in the high schooler, we keep sharing more essays, more compositions. So make sure that you grab uh, your Daily Nation newspaper on Monday, the high schooler magazine, to keep getting more of this discussion. In case there's anything else that you'd want us to discuss, as usual, let me know.